Welcome back to the Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Raymond Wu. In this final segment, we're going to continue our conversation with Mr. Jeffrey Mindich, and we're going to talk about something more on the lifestyle side. We're going to talk about food to begin with. Jeffrey, you are well known as a connoisseur on food. What is your favorite dish in Taiwanese cuisine?
What is my favorite dish? It's hard to say. There's
so many. Yes.
There's so many, and Taiwanese food is very varied. Whether you're talking about these kind of little snack type of things,
okay.
Maybe about, gosh, we're talking about 16, 17 years ago when I was writing for the Government Information Office. They had a magazine out at the time was called the Free China Review. Then it was called the Free Taipei Review. Now I think it's just called Taiwan Review. But
yes.
I went down to Tainan in the south of Taiwan,
yeah.
and I went with 2 photographers and editors, and we spent 3 days just going around and eating all of the different local foods. I think we must have eaten like 10 to 12 meals a day. Finally, one of the photographers just asked for mercy. He said, "Can I just watch you eat instead of?" And it was really amazing. There's just the variety of stuff here, and then on top of that,
yes.
You've got tremendous seafood. You've got the Japanese influence because Taiwan was a Japanese colony for 50 years. So I mean, there's quite a variety of things here. So it's kind of hard to pick one thing. I mean, so much of it is quite good. But I will say, the stinky tofu, which a lot of foreigners are so scared of, I enjoy that. It's okay.
Yeah, we also have different ways of cooking that.
Sure,
yeah. Sure. Let me ask you, who does most of the cooking back home?
Well, actually, because again,
you're very busy.
Both my wife and I are working. Yes. On the weekend, I tend to cook, do some of the cooking. I probably cook about, I'd say, between 12 and 15 different countries worth of food. I mean, French, Italian, Spanish, Mediterranean, Moroccan, Vietnamese, Thai, Japanese. So on any given weekend, maybe we're having some Vietnamese food this week, or we're having some Italian food the following week. And also because of the tremendous abundance of seafood here, we'll go out to the fish harbor and, you buy live crabs and live seafood.
They cook it on site.
No, we bring it home, cook it ourselves. Yeah, bring it home in a cooler and we cook it. So one thing you will never do in Taiwan is starve.
Yes, you certainly have a lot of...
At any time of the day or night
choices.
too.
Yes.
If back in the U.S. at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, you're hungry, all you have is the refrigerator.
Yes, whatever's in stock.
Here you go out onto the street at any time of day or night, there's always something to eat.
You still get a lot of choices
Absolutely,
out there.
Yeah.
Yes. And let me ask you, Jeffrey, I mean, among all the different places that you've been to, including home back in the U.S., what would be your preference, for food, for things that would attract you, spicy stuff, or Italian food, or the American or European style, whichever. Would you mind sharing that with us?
I think I go through phases. I mean, I'm from New York originally, and that's a place where, you can get a great Taiwanese meal, and then you walk 4 doors down and you get a Japanese meal, and you walk another 4 doors down and you have a great Italian restaurant.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
There you've got a tremendous variety.
Yeah.
I think overall here it goes in cycles. I think, the Japanese influence on Taiwan, I don't think when I first came here I was really so into Japanese food, but I think after living here, you really get into Japanese food, and then you've got, like in Pingdong, you've got the Toro, the Black Tuna Festival, and I tend to really appreciate.
You've been down there yourself.
Yeah, well, actually, the former county magistrate invited me down for a black tuna meal, so that was very good. And it goes in phases. Sometimes, we get back from Vietnam, and then I'll be on a spicy Vietnamese Thai kick for a few months. So it goes in cycles.
Let me ask you that. Some people say that you look at the food that people eat, that tells you a lot about the culture. Would you agree with such a a statement?
That might have been true one day in the past, but I think now people are so international. I mean, even if you look at Taipei, maybe tonight they go for Thai food, and tomorrow they go for Taiwanese food, and the next day they go for Italian food. I mean, there's such a mixture now that, certainly there are foods that have their cultural
element
in them. But I'd say that nowadays people are so international that you know, they're eating everything all the time. So it's
and also, you know, Jeffrey, you brought up the fact that, you know, Taiwan, especially like, you know, in the urban areas like Taipei, you could get choices of different food, you know, 24 hours a day.
Sure.
You go out, you know, middle of the night, you still have a lot of different choices. And also that, you know that, Jeffrey, you have a book out, you had a book out, you know, on food, on choices in Taiwan. Would you, you know, tell us a little bit about the, you know, the book itself, and what were you trying to, you know, discover? And what were you trying to tell the viewers, you know, about foods in Taiwan?
Well, actually, what the book was pretty much a compilation of a newspaper column that I had, where I talked about not so much a particular food at a restaurant, but more cultural differences, the way that different cultures look at food. And, you know, for example, a few years ago, my father came, and he was there with my stepmother, and they were, we went to a buffet somewhere, and they're standing around somewhere talking, and I went over to see, well, what is so interesting? And they said to me, hey, look, shrimps have heads. I said, of course, shrimps have heads.
But back home.
But back home, I mean, you don't see a head on a fish, you don't see a head on a shrimp, and in fact, my wife and I, one time, we went to this very famous seafood restaurant in the U.S. And you know, here when people cook crabs, they like to open up the crab themselves, and inside you have, you know, the various parts of the crab that you know that you eat. We got back there and we turned over the shell and the crab, and it was empty.
It was clean.
And you know, we said, well, where's the rest? Oh, they said, oh, we already cleaned all the dirty stuff out for you. So, you know, basically I was looking at how different cultures, Western and Taiwanese cultures, look at food, and it was a very popular column, and so the publisher eventually put it into a book. And in fact, when I did it, I said, well, what can I give my readers so that they don't feel like they're paying money just to get the same thing? So I ended up writing a whole series of articles. For each food I talked about, I would find an English idiom that was related to food. So, you know, for beef, you know, where's the beef? Or, you know, for crab, stop being such a crab. You know, so for everyone, I got a whole bunch of idioms about English food. So it was, I had a lot of fun doing that. And basically, you do see very big cultural differences, approaches to food, and you know, foods have certain symbolic meanings in certain cultures. So even though we're international, I think people, like, you know, when you come on to Christmas or Thanksgiving, even though Americans may travel around the world and they may have a very global menu or a very global outlook, I still find Americans in Taiwan, when it comes, say, Thanksgiving, they really think about turkeys. So, or you know, Taiwanese who are in the U.S., when it's Chinese New Year, there may be certain foods that they really feel, you know, that a hamburger or a steak just isn't going to work for Chinese New Year.
You talk about the holidays. You know, of course, we have the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday coming up very soon, and also at the same time, we're also going to have an early Chinese New Year next year that happening in the latter half of January. And from, you know, Chinese New Year all the way down to Christmas, you know, Thanksgiving included along the way, how are the different holidays or festivities, you know, staged in Taiwan, and what are some of the more, you know, unique and characteristic, you know, activities that you've seen, events that you've seen that really reflect, you know, the culture here in Taiwan?
Well, you know, I have to be honest and say that the emphasis on holidays in Taiwan is kind of on the decline in some ways. And you give an example of like Chinese New Year. In the past, everything would close for a week. There wasn't a restaurant open, and all of the families would have to get together in their own homes and cook. And now sometimes people are even getting a little too lazy to cook, so they just go out to a restaurant.
It's a long holiday nowadays.
It's a long holiday, but I think the basic concept of families getting together, I think that doesn't change over cultures, but, you know, the basic foods, I mean, you know, the fact that there has to be a fish in the Chinese table to represent good fortune for the new year. And so I find there's a lot more symbolism in Taiwanese food than there is in American food. I mean, if you ask people, well, why do we eat turkey on Christmas. They also eat turkey on Christmas. I think the only logical explanation is because you have a lot of people over, and it's the one thing that's big enough to feed everybody.
Yes.
So, you know, but in the Taiwanese, there's a lot of symbolism in food.
Yeah, for example, meatballs, the lion head,
the lion.
That represent, good fortune, prosperity in the new year.
Or even people when they're having, elderly people when they're having their birthday to eat those very long noodles to represent long life. So I see a lot more symbolism in food. I mean, maybe we could say Thanksgiving is somewhat of a recreation of the original pilgrim meal. So even though we know now that they probably didn't have turkey, but okay, we won't get into that. But overall, I still see a lot more symbolism in the Taiwanese food culture. I mean, things, certain foods having certain meanings is quite important. You know, like the rice dumplings for the Dragon Boat Festival that they threw into the river. Exactly. So there's a lot of symbolism in the food here that you don't really see in the West.
How about for the younger generation? I know you have a family here, you have your children. How do they look at the things available in Taiwan in terms of cultural, in terms of foods, in terms of other things related to lifestyle? How do they adjust as compared to the home culture back home?
Well, I think it's always an advantage for people to grow up in a multicultural, multilingual society. And, I can't answer that question now. I'm going to answer it maybe in 10 years because I'll be very interested to see. I had a discussion with this about this exact thing with a friend, and I said, well, when do you send your child? Do you send your child for Chinese form, mostly Chinese education or mostly English education? Which culture do you help them to associate with? And his answer was very simple. He said, you don't need to do any of that. Your child, when he reaches the appropriate age, will make his own association of which culture he feels closer to.
Yes.
So that's okay with me.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in 10 years because your answer will be very important to me too. Jeffrey, thank you very much to be on the program.
It's been a pleasure, Raymond. Thank you.
Well, thank you for watching the Taiwan Outlook. I'll see you next time on Macroview Television. Thank you for coming.